The scream pierced the night like a knife, echoing across the valley and slicing through the peaceful symphony of crickets and distant coyote calls. Zara Keller pressed her back against the rough brick wall of the general store, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps that formed small clouds in the chilly night air of Knights Ferry, California. The year was 1876, and she was about to discover just how dangerous the West could be for a woman alone after dark. "You can't run forever, pretty lady," drawled the tallest of the three men who had cornered her in the alley. His tobacco-stained teeth gleamed yellow in the moonlight as he grinned. "We just want to show you some hospitality. Please," Zara whispered, clutching her reticule to her chest, the few coins inside hardly worth what these men intended to take from her. "I have nothing of value," the second man, wearing a filthy bowler hat, laughed. "That ain't true. Pretty thing like you has plenty to offer." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs as the men closed in. She'd come west with such hope, such determination to make a new life for herself after her father's death had left her alone in Boston with nothing but debts and unwanted suitors. The teaching position in Knights Ferry had seemed like Providence a chance to start fresh, where no one knew her name or her circumstances. Now, not even 2 days after her arrival, she feared her journey would end in this dirty alley. The third man, shorter than the others but with arms thick as tree trunks, reached for her. His calloused fingers brushed her cheek. "Soft as silk," he muttered. Something wild and desperate rose in Zara's throat. She opened her mouth and screamed with every ounce of strength in her lungs, a piercing cry that tore through the night. "Shut her up," hissed the tall one, lunging forward. Zara ducked and ran, but the alley was a dead end. A hand caught her skirt, yanking her backward. She stumbled and fell hard on the dirt, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Tears stung her eyes as rough hands grabbed her shoulders. Then came the thunder of hooves. The men froze, turning toward the sound that grew louder with each passing second. A horse and rider appeared at the entrance to the alley, silhouetted against the dim light from the street. The horse reared, pawing at the air with powerful forelegs. "Let her go." The voice was low, steady, and carried the unmistakable promise of violence. "Mind your own business, mister," said the man in the bowler. "This ain't your concern." The rider dismounted in one fluid motion. In the dim light, Zara could make out broad shoulders, a lean frame, and the glint of a star pinned to his vest. "As deputy of this town, I'm making it my concern." He stepped forward, and the moonlight revealed his face, young but weathered, with eyes that had seen too much for their years. "Step away from the lady, now." The tall man spat on the ground. 3 against 1 lawman, bad odds. "For you," came the cool reply as the deputy's hand hovered near his holster. The tension hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Zara held her breath, afraid the slightest sound might trigger bloodshed. Finally, the man in the bowler hat gave a curt nod. "Come on, boys." Plenty other entertainment in town tonight. The 3 backed away, muttering curses under their breath. The tall one pointed at the deputy. "This ain't over, Lawson." "It is for tonight," the deputy replied evenly, not moving until the men had disappeared around the corner. Only then did he turn to Zara, extending a hand to help her up. "Are you hurt, miss?" She took his hand, her own trembling. "No, they didn't." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." In the silvery light, she saw him clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 5 or 6 years her senior, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. His eyes, which she now saw were a startling blue, assessed her with concern. "I'm Deputy Adam Lawson," he said, his voice gentler now, "and you must be the new schoolteacher." Zara nodded, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Zara Keller. I just arrived yesterday on the afternoon stage." "Welcome to Knights Ferry," he said with a wry smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Though I apologize that your introduction to our town hasn't been more hospitable." "Are all the men here so?" She trailed off, uncertain how to finish the sentence. "No," he said firmly. "Those 3 are trouble. They ride with a gang that works the mining camps up north. They're just passing through." He paused. "Where are you staying, Miss Keller? I'll see you safely there." "The boarding house on Pine Street, Mrs. Halloway's." Deputy Lawson nodded. "Good woman, Mrs. Halloway. Keeps a clean house and doesn't tolerate foolishness." He gestured to his horse, a tall chestnut with a white blaze down its face. "Rusty here can carry us both that far." Zara hesitated, eyeing the large animal warily. "I've never ridden before." Adam Lawson's expression softened slightly. "Eastern lady through and through, don't worry, I'll make sure you don't fall." With surprising gentleness for a man who had just faced down 3 outlaws without flinching, he helped her mount the horse, then swung up behind her. One arm encircled her waist to steady her as he took the reins with his free hand. "Hold onto the saddle horn," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. As they rode through the darkened streets of Knights Ferry, Zara was acutely aware of the strong arm around her waist, the solid chest at her back. Despite the terror of moments before, a different kind of unease now fluttered in her stomach, not fear, but something unfamiliar and unsettling. "What brings you to California, Miss Keller?" His voice rumbled against her back. "A fresh start," she replied simply, not ready to share the details of her circumstances with a stranger, even one who had just saved her. "Most folks come west for that reason," he acknowledged. "Knights Ferry's a decent place for it, small but growing. The mine brings work, the river brings trade. People here mind their business, mostly." They arrived at Mrs. Halloway's boarding house too quickly. The 2-story white clapboard building stood dark and quiet, save for a single lamp burning in the front window. Adam dismounted first, then reached up to help Zara down. His hands were strong and sure at her waist as he lifted her effortlessly to the ground. For a moment they stood close, too close, her hands braced against his chest, his still at her waist. He stepped back abruptly, clearing his throat. "You should be safe here. Mrs. Halloway keeps her door locked after 9, though." Zara glanced at the darkened house. "I fear I may be locked out already." "Knock softly," he advised. "The widow's a light sleeper." He hesitated. "Will you be all right now, Miss Keller?" Something in his tone made her look up at him. In the soft glow from the house lamp, his face seemed younger, the hard lines of the deputy momentarily softened. "Yes," she said. "Thanks to you, Deputy Lawson." He touched the brim of his hat. "Just doing my job, madam. But perhaps until you're more familiar with Knights Ferry, you might want to avoid walking alone after dark. I'll remember that advice." She moved toward the house, then paused, turning back. "Good night, Deputy, and thank you again." "Adam," he said quietly. "When I'm not wearing the badge, I'm just Adam." Zara nodded, a small smile touching her lips despite the evening's ordeal. "Good night, Adam." She watched as he mounted his horse and rode away, his straight back and broad shoulders silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Only when he had disappeared from view did she turn to knock on Mrs. Halloway's door, wondering what other surprises Knights Ferry, California had in store for her. Mrs. Halloway opened the door with surprising quickness, her gray hair tucked beneath a nightcap and a shawl pulled tight around her bony shoulders. "Miss Keller, I was beginning to worry. It's not safe for a young woman to be out after dark in these parts." Her sharp eyes took in Zara's disheveled appearance. "What happened to you?" Zara hesitated. "I got lost. Deputy Lawson was kind enough to escort me back." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Adam Lawson's a good man, one of the few in these parts." She ushered Zara inside, locking the door behind them. "You'll learn your way around soon enough. Come now, you must be exhausted. Your first day with the children is tomorrow." As Zara climbed the stairs to her small room, the events of the evening replayed in her mind. The terror of those moments in the alley still made her hands shake, but when she thought of the deputy of Adam, a different kind of trembling took hold. She told herself it was merely gratitude, nothing more. After all, she hadn't come west to find a husband or romance. She'd come to escape those very entanglements and build a life of independence. Yet as she drifted off to sleep, it was the deputy's blue eyes and the strength of his arms around her waist that followed her into her dreams. The schoolhouse bell rang out across Knights Ferry the next morning, calling the children to their lessons. Zara stood at the door of the small one-room schoolhouse, watching as her pupils arrived in 2s and 3s. Some came on horseback, others walked from town, lunch pails in hand. They eyed her with undisguised curiosity, the new teacher from back east with her proper clothes and Eastern accent. "Good morning." She greeted each child with a smile, trying to match names to the faces she'd been given on a list by the town council. 22 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age would be under her care. The morning passed in a blur of introductions, assessments, and establishing routines. By noon, when she dismissed the children for their midday meal, Zara felt a cautious optimism. These frontier children were different from the polished young ladies she taught in Boston, rougher around the edges, more direct in their questions, but eager to learn nonetheless. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing her afternoon lessons when a shadow fell across the doorway. Miss Keller. She looked up to find Deputy Lawson standing there, hat in hand. In the bright light of day, she could see him more clearly, the sun-bronzed skin, the faint scar that traced his jawline, the way his dark blonde hair curled slightly at his collar. He wore the same clothes as the night before, suggesting he'd been on duty all night. "Deputy," she acknowledged, rising to her feet. "What brings you to the schoolhouse?" "Just checking to make sure you're settling in all right." His eyes scanned the classroom. "And making sure those boys from last night didn't come looking for you." "That's very thoughtful." She smoothed her skirts, suddenly self-conscious. "The children will be returning soon," he nodded, turning his hat in his hands. "I just wanted to let you know that those men rode out this morning. Headed north, probably back to the mining camps." Relief washed through her. "Thank you for telling me." Adam stepped into the classroom, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. He seemed too large for the small space, too rugged among the neat rows of desks and books. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned you got lost last night," he said, a hint of question in his tone. Zara felt her cheeks warm. "I thought it best not to worry her with the details. Probably wise." He studied her for a moment. "You don't strike me as the type to get lost, Miss Keller." "No." She raised an eyebrow. "And what type do I strike you as, Deputy?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The determined type, the kind who knows exactly where she's going." Something fluttered in her chest at his assessment. "Perhaps I did until last night." He held her gaze, and for a moment the schoolroom seemed to recede around them. Then voices and footsteps sounded outside, breaking the spell. "The children are coming back," she said, her voice not quite steady. Adam stepped back toward the door. "I'll leave you to your teaching then." He settled his hat back on his head. "Good day, Miss Keller." "Good day, Deputy," she replied, watching as he nodded politely to the returning children, who regarded him with a mixture of awe and wariness. One of the older girls, Sarah Miller, lingered in the doorway after he'd gone. "Deputy Lawson doesn't come to the school much," she observed, her 14-year-old face alight with curiosity. "Was he giving you trouble, Miss Keller?" "Not at all," Zara replied, gathering her composure. "He was just welcoming me to Knights Ferry." Sarah's eyes sparkled with unspoken questions, but Zara rang the bell, calling the class to order before the girl could voice them. As she began the afternoon lessons, she pushed thoughts of the deputy from her mind. She had a job to do, a purpose to fulfill. Knights Ferry needed a teacher, not a woman distracted by a handsome lawman. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Zara found her footing in the classroom, earning the respect of her pupils and the approval of the town's families. She took her meals at Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, attended Sunday services at the small white church, and gradually became acquainted with the townspeople of Knights Ferry. She saw Adam Lawson often, though their interactions were brief and public: a nod on the street, a polite greeting after church, a short conversation when their paths crossed at the general store. He maintained a professional distance that both relieved and disappointed her. Sometimes she caught him watching her from across the street or through the window of the sheriff's office, his expression unreadable. It was early October when she encountered him again under more private circumstances. The afternoon was unusually warm, and after dismissing her students, Zara had decided to walk along the river that gave Knights Ferry its name. She followed a well-worn path that led from town down to the water's edge, where cottonwoods cast dappled shade across the bank. She was sitting on a flat rock, reading a book of poetry she'd brought from Boston, when she heard the approach of a horse. Looking up, she saw Adam Lawson riding toward her, his badge catching the sunlight. "Miss Keller," he greeted her, dismounting, "you're a fair way from town." "It's a beautiful afternoon," she replied, closing her book. "I wanted to enjoy it before winter comes." He tied his horse to a nearby tree and approached, removing his hat. "Mind if I join you? I've been riding the boundary of the county since dawn." "Please," she gestured to the rock beside her, which was large enough for two if they sat close. Adam settled himself beside her, stretching out his long legs. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the river flow past. "How are you finding our little town after a month?" he asked finally. "It's growing on me," Zara admitted. "The people are kind once they decide you belong. And do you?" "Belong?" She considered the question. "I'm not sure yet, but I'd like to." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "The children talk about you. Say you're teaching them things the last schoolmaster never bothered with." "Like what?" "Poetry, art, history that doesn't just involve dates and battles." He glanced at her book. "Tennyson," surprised, she nodded. "You know his work." A faint smile crossed his face. "I wasn't born with a badge and a gun, Miss Keller. I had schooling once." Zara studied him with new interest. "Where are you from, Deputy Lawson? Originally, I mean, Missouri. My father had a small farm there." He picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. "Lost it all in the war." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Was he killed at Shiloh? I was 15. He skipped another stone. "Came west with my mother and sister after that. My mother passed 5 years ago. My sister married a shopkeeper in Sacramento. And you became a lawman." He nodded. "Seemed like the right thing to do at the time. I'm good with a gun, have a decent sense of right and wrong. People respect the badge even if they don't always respect the man wearing it." "I think they respect both," Zara offered. Adam gave her a sidelong glance. "You've been listening to town gossip. Mrs. Halloway may have mentioned that you've kept Knights Ferry safer than the last 3 deputies combined." He shrugged. "Not hard to do. Last one was drunk most days. The one before him was on the take from every gambling house and brothel. And the third shot in the back his first month." Adam's voice was matter of fact. "It's not always a safe job." Zara shivered despite the warm afternoon. "Like that night you helped me. Those men could have hurt you. It's what I'm paid for." He looked at her directly now. "Why were you out alone that night, Miss Keller? The truth this time." Zara sighed, tracing the embossed cover of her book with one finger. "I wanted to see the stars. In Boston, the buildings and the smoke make it hard to see the sky clearly. I'd heard that out west the stars were so bright you could almost touch them." She shook her head at her own foolishness. "I didn't realize how dangerous it could be." "It's not usually," Adam said. "Knights Ferry is mostly peaceful, but like anywhere, it has its dark corners." "And its heroes," she added softly. He looked away, uncomfortable with her praise. "I'm no hero, Miss Keller." "Zara," she said impulsively, "if I'm to call you Adam when you're not wearing your badge, then you should call me Zara when I'm not in my classroom." He studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes intent. "Zara," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. Something warm unfurled in her chest at the sound of her name in his low voice. They sat in silence again, but it was a different kind of silence now charged with an awareness that hadn't been there before. "I should get back," she said finally, rising to her feet. "Mrs. Halloway will wonder where I am." Adam stood as well, towering over her. "I'll walk with you." He collected his horse and fell into step beside her as they headed back toward town. As they walked, he asked about her life in Boston, and she found herself telling him things she hadn't shared with anyone in Knights Ferry about her father's business failures, the mounting debts, the pressure to marry a wealthy banker who could solve her financial problems. "So you ran," he concluded as the first buildings of town came into view. "I prefer to think of it as choosing my own path," Zara corrected. "Running implies fear. I wasn't afraid to stay. I was determined to live differently." Adam nodded, a new respect in his eyes. "Determined, as I said." They had reached the edge of town now, where they would inevitably be seen together by curious eyes. Zara felt a reluctance to end their conversation, to return to the polite distance they maintained in public. "Thank you for the escort, Deputy," she said, reverting to formality. He touched his hat brim. "My pleasure, Miss Keller." but his eyes held the memory of their conversation by the river, of the momentary dropping of barriers. As she watched him lead his horse toward the sheriff's office, Zara realized with a start that she was in danger of developing feelings for Adam Lawson, feelings that had no place in the independent life she was trying to build. She would need to be more careful, to guard her heart more diligently. Yet that night, as she prepared for bed in her small room at the boarding house, she found herself standing at the window, gazing out at the stars that had drawn her outside that fateful night. Somewhere beneath those same stars, Adam Lawson was making his rounds, keeping watch over the sleeping town. The thought brought a smile to her lips before she could suppress it. The autumn days grew shorter, and a chill settled over Knights Ferry. Zara found herself busy with school preparations for the upcoming Christmas pageant, a tradition the town embraced with enthusiasm. Every child had a part to play, lines to memorize, costumes to fit. One Saturday morning in late November, she was working in the schoolhouse, sketching designs for backdrops when the door opened. Adam stood there, snowflakes melting on his shoulders from the season's first dusting. "Deputy," she greeted him, surprised, "what brings you here on a Saturday?" He stamped his boots on the threshold. "Sheriff asked me to check on you. Mrs. Halloway mentioned you'd be here alone all day." "That's very considerate but unnecessary. I'm perfectly safe." She gestured around the empty schoolroom. "No alleyways or unsavory characters here, all the same." He stepped inside, closing the door against the cold. "What are you working on?" Zara showed him her sketches for the Christmas pageant. "The children are very excited. It seems the entire town attends." "They do," Adam confirmed, studying her drawings. "These are good. You're talented." She felt a flush of pleasure at his praise. "Thank you. I've always enjoyed drawing. I thought I might paint these on sheets to hang as backdrops." "You'll need help hanging them," he observed, looking up at the high ceiling of the schoolhouse. "Mr. Jenkins from the livery stable promised to assist," Zara replied, "though I haven't finalized the designs yet." Adam wandered around the classroom, examining the children's work displayed on the walls. "You've made changes here," he noted. "It's brighter." Zara looked around at the maps she'd hung, the student artwork, the fresh curtains she'd sewn for the windows. "I wanted it to feel welcoming." "It does." He turned to face her. "The children are lucky to have you." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "I'm lucky to have them. They've accepted me more readily than I expected." "This town needed someone like you," Adam said quietly. "Someone who sees beauty and possibility instead of just dust and hardship." The intensity of his gaze made her look away. "You make me sound far more noble than I am." "I came here for selfish reasons to escape my problems in Boston." "Maybe, but you've done good here all the same." He moved closer until he stood just a few feet away. "Zara," the sound of her name made her look up, and what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. Desire, certainly, but something else too, a tenderness that made her knees weak. "Adam," she whispered, not knowing what else to say. He took another step closer, close enough now that she could see the snowflakes melting in his eyelashes. "I've tried to keep my distance," he said, his voice rough. "Told myself you didn't come west looking for entanglements." "I didn't," she admitted. "I know, and I respect that." He hesitated. "But I find myself thinking about you more than I should." Zara's heart hammered in her chest. "I think about you too." His hand came up to touch her cheek, so gently she might have imagined it. "Tell me to leave, and I will." She couldn't speak, couldn't find the words to send him away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. It was all the invitation he needed. His lips found hers, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Zara felt herself melting into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. The kiss deepened, his mouth moving over hers with an urgency that matched the racing of her heart. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I shouldn't have done that," Adam said, though he made no move to release her. "No," Zara agreed, her hands still resting on his chest. "It complicates things." He studied her face. "Do you regret it?" She shook her head slowly. "No, though perhaps I will later when my senses return." A smile touched his lips. "I've wanted to do that since the night I found you in that alley." "That long?" She was surprised. Longer, it seems, with each passing day. His thumb traced her lower lip. But this isn't what you came to Knights Ferry for. No, she agreed. I came to be independent, to build a life that's mine alone. He nodded, releasing her and stepping back. I understand, and I won't press you. The loss of his warmth left her feeling bereft. Adam, it's all right, he said, his voice gentle. You don't owe me an explanation. She took a deep breath. What I was going to say is that my feelings for you have taken me by surprise. I need time to understand them. Hope flickered in his eyes. Take all the time you need, I'm not going anywhere. The door to the schoolhouse suddenly burst open and they stepped apart quickly. Sheriff Morgan, a grizzled man in his 60s, stood on the threshold. There you are, Lawson, he growled. Telegram from the marshal's office. They've spotted Tyler Kane and his gang heading this way, could be here by nightfall. Adam's expression changed instantly, all softness vanishing as he straightened. How many? 6, maybe 7. They hit a bank in Sonora yesterday, killed 2 people. The sheriff nodded to Zara. Miss Keller, you should head back to town. Storm's picking up and with Kane on the loose, it's not safe out here alone. I'll escort her, Adam said, his voice all business now. Let me see that telegram. As the sheriff handed over the paper, Zara gathered her drawings with trembling hands. The name Tyler Kane meant nothing to her, but the reaction of the 2 lawmen told her everything she needed to know. Who is Tyler Kane? She asked as Adam helped her into her coat a few minutes later. Outlaw. Runs with a gang that's been terrorizing towns up and down the Sierra for the past year. His face was grim. Those men who cornered you that night, they ride with Kane sometimes. A cold fear gripped Zara's heart. And they're coming here, maybe. The telegram says they were seen heading southwest from Sonora. Could be they're just passing through. He checked his gun, a gesture that seemed automatic. Either way, I want you to stay at Mrs. Halloway's tonight. Don't go out for any reason. The ride back to town was tense and silent, with Adam scanning the horizon constantly. The light snow had turned to sleet, making the roads slippery and visibility poor. By the time they reached Mrs. Halloway's boarding house, Zara was chilled to the bone. Adam dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist. Promise me you'll stay inside, he said, his eyes intense. I promise. She searched his face. Be careful, Adam. He nodded once, then surprised her by leaning down to press a quick, hard kiss to her lips. Lock the doors, he instructed, then mounted his horse and rode off toward the sheriff's office without looking back. Mrs. Halloway was full of questions when Zara entered the boarding house, but she answered them vaguely, her mind still reeling from both the kiss and the news about Tyler Kane's gang. She spent the afternoon helping the older woman bake bread, trying to distract herself from worry, but as darkness fell, her anxiety only grew. From the front window, she could see men gathering at the sheriff's office across the street. Some carried rifles, others checked revolvers. The town was preparing for trouble. They've formed a vigilance committee, Mrs. Halloway explained, peering out beside her. Most of the men in town have signed on to help the sheriff and deputy if Kane shows up. Is that legal? Zara asked. The older woman shrugged. Legal or not, it's necessary. Kane's gang would overrun the town otherwise. As the evening wore on, Zara found it impossible to concentrate on anything. She tried to read, to grade papers, to sew, but her thoughts kept returning to Adam, to the kiss they'd shared, to the danger he now faced. It was past midnight when she heard the thunder of hooves, shouts, and then the crack of gunfire. She rushed to the window, Mrs. Halloway close behind. Lord have mercy, the older woman breathed as they watched riders tear down the main street, guns blazing. Zara counted at least 6 men, their faces obscured by bandanas. They fired wildly into the air and at buildings, shattering windows and splintering wood. Get away from the window. Mrs. Halloway pulled her back just as a bullet smashed through the glass, embedding itself in the far wall. They huddled in the center of the room, listening to the chaos outside. More gunshots, men yelling, the crash of breaking glass. Zara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Where's the sheriff? Where's Adam? She whispered. Doing their job, girl. Trying to protect the town. Mrs. Halloway's face was pale but determined. We need to get to the cellar. It's safer there. They were halfway to the kitchen when the front door crashed open. Zara turned to see a tall man standing in the doorway, a gun in each hand and a cruel smile visible beneath his bandana. "Well now," he drawled, pulling down the cloth to reveal his face. "What have we here?" It was the tall man from the alley, the one who had threatened her that night. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Well, if it ain't the pretty lady from before," he said, stepping inside. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon. Where's your protector now, hum?" Mrs. Halloway pushed Zara behind her. "You get out of my house, you devil," she spat. The man laughed. "Feisty old bird, ain't you?" He gestured with his gun. "Step aside, Grandma. Me and the lady have unfinished business." "Run, Zara," Mrs. Halloway shouted, lunging at the intruder with surprising speed. The man backhanded her, sending her crumpling to the floor. Zara screamed and ran for the back door, but he was faster, catching her arm and spinning her around. "Nowhere to run this time," he growled, his face inches from hers. "Let her go, Kane." The voice from the doorway was steady, deadly calm. Adam Lawson stood there, his revolver pointed at the outlaw's head. Tyler Kane's grip on Zara's arm tightened painfully. "Well, if it isn't the hero deputy," he sneered. "One step closer and she gets a bullet." Adam's eyes flickered to Zara, then back to Kane. "You're surrounded, Tyler. Your men are either dead or captured. It's over." "Not for me, it ain't." Kane jerked Zara in front of him as a shield. "I'm walking out of here and she's coming with me. That's not happening." Adam's voice was cold as steel. "Then she dies." Kane pressed his gun to Zara's temple. "Your choice, lawman." Time seemed to slow. Zara could hear her own heartbeat, see the muscle ticking in Adam's jaw, feel the cold metal of the gun against her skin. She was going to die here in Mrs. Halloway's parlor without ever having told Adam how she felt about him. Then, in a blur of movement too fast to follow, Adam fired. The bullet whistled past Zara's ear, so close she felt the heat of it, and struck Kane in the shoulder of his gun arm. He howled in pain, his grip on Zara loosening just enough for her to wrench free. She threw herself to the floor as Adam fired again. This time the bullet found Kane's chest. The outlaw staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face before collapsing in a heap. Adam was at Zara's side in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt? Did he hurt you?" His hands moved over her, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," she gasped, trembling violently. Mrs. Halloway, they both turned to the older woman who was stirring and groaning on the floor. Adam helped her sit up, examining the bruise forming on her cheek. "Nothing broken," he pronounced, relief evident in his voice. "Just a nasty bruise." Sheriff Morgan appeared in the doorway, rifle in hand. "Kane," he questioned. Adam nodded toward the body. "Dead. Good riddance," the sheriff grunted. "His boys are either dead or in custody. Town's secure." Only then did Zara notice the bloodstains spreading across Adam's left sleeve. "You're wounded," she exclaimed, reaching for him. He glanced at his arm as if noticing the injury for the first time. "Just a graze. One of Kane's men got lucky." "Let me see," she insisted, already unbuttoning his sleeve to expose the wound. It was indeed a graze, but deep enough to need cleaning and bandaging. While Mrs. Halloway went to fetch her medical supplies, Zara helped Adam remove his vest and shirt. The sight of his bare chest, lean and muscled, scarred in places from previous encounters, made her breath catch. "I was so afraid," she admitted quietly as she cleaned the wound with whiskey from Mrs. Halloway's cabinet. "When I heard the shooting, all I could think about was you out there." Adam's hand covered hers, stilling her movements. "I thought only of getting to you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I saw Kane had you, I've never been so scared in my life." Zara met his gaze, seeing in his eyes all the feelings she'd been trying to deny in herself. "I thought I came west to be alone," she whispered, "to prove I could be independent." And now, his question was barely audible, she leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. "Now I think perhaps independence doesn't have to mean solitude." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "Zara Keller, you are the strongest, most independent woman I've ever known. Nothing about caring for someone changes that." Their lips met in a kiss that spoke of relief, of fear overcome, of possibilities suddenly opening before them. They broke apart at the sound of Mrs. Holloway clearing her throat. Well, the older woman said, eyeing them with a mixture of amusement and approval as she set down her medical supplies. I see some good has come of this terrible night after all. Zara felt herself blushing as she took the bandages and began wrapping Adam's arm. It seems so, she agreed softly. The dawn broke clear and cold over Knights Ferry, the fresh snow covering the signs of the previous night's violence. Zara stood on the porch of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, watching as townspeople emerged to assess the damage. The general store had a shattered window, the saloon's batwing doors hung crookedly, and bullet holes marked several buildings, but miraculously, no townspeople had been killed. 2 of Kane's gang were dead, including Kane himself, and the rest were locked in the town jail awaiting transport to the territorial prison. Adam had left just before dawn after spending the night in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, ostensibly to guard against any remaining threat, but in reality to remain close to Zara. They had talked for hours about their pasts, their hopes, their fears, and the unexpected feelings that had grown between them. Now, as she watched him directing the cleanup efforts in the street, she felt a certainty settling in her heart. This was where she belonged, not just in Knights Ferry, but with him. He looked up, as if sensing her gaze, and offered a tired smile. She returned it, a private communication in the midst of the bustling activity. Later, they would have time to explore what had begun between them. For now, it was enough to know they had survived the night, and that tomorrow held promise. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The town rebuilt what had been damaged, celebrated the defeat of the Kane gang, and prepared for Christmas with renewed enthusiasm. Zara threw herself into the preparations for the pageant, grateful for the distraction from the gossip that inevitably arose about her and the deputy, Mrs. Holloway had been discreet, but in a town the size of Knights Ferry, it was impossible to hide the fact that something had changed between the schoolteacher and the lawman. They were seen walking together, taking meals at the hotel restaurant, attending church side by side. Adam called on her properly at the boarding house, sitting in the parlor under Mrs. Holloway's watchful eye. It was during one such visit, a week before Christmas, that Adam seemed particularly nervous. Is something wrong? Zara asked as he paced the small parlor. No, he said quickly. Nothing's wrong, He ran a hand through his hair. I've been thinking. A dangerous pastime, she teased gently. He smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Indeed. He sat beside her on the small settee. Zara, these past weeks I've never been happier. Nor have I, she admitted, taking his hand. I know you came west to be independent, to make your own way, he continued, and I respect that. I admire it, in fact. It's one of the many things I love about you. Zara's heart stuttered at the word love. They hadn't spoken it yet, though it hung in the air between them during every moment together. What I'm trying to say, Adam went on, is that I want to build a life with you, but not at the expense of the life you came here to build for yourself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I'm not asking you to give up teaching or your independence. I'm asking if you'd consider sharing your life with me as my equal. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. It was my mother's, he explained. Zara Keller, will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes as she looked from the ring to his face, so earnest and vulnerable. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Adam, I will. His smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. He leaned in to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and joy. Mrs. Holloway will be scandalized if she walks in, Zara murmured against his lips. Mrs. Holloway has been plotting this since the night Kane attacked, Adam replied with a chuckle. I believe she's conveniently visiting her sister in the kitchen right now, Zara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. When? She asked. When shall we marry? As soon as you wish, he said, though I thought perhaps after the school year ends in the spring. It would give us time to build a proper home. You've thought this through, she observed, touched by his consideration. I've thought of little else. His thumb traced the ring on her finger. There's a piece of land just outside town overlooking the river. I've had my eye on it for some time. It would be a good place for a house, with a garden, she asked, already imagining it. And room for children when the time comes, he added softly, watching her face. The image of a home filled with children, their children, made her heart swell. I'd like that, she said, very much. They were married on a perfect spring day in May of 1877. The entire town turned out for the wedding, held in the small church and followed by a celebration that spilled into the streets. The schoolchildren formed an honor guard, tossing flower petals as Zara and Adam emerged from the church. Mrs. Holloway wept openly, declaring it the happiest day since her own wedding 40 years prior. Sheriff Morgan, standing as Adam's best man, presented them with a hand-carved rocking chair for their new porch. Even the circuit judge in town for the occasion remarked that he'd never seen a more well-matched pair. As the sun set over Knights Ferry, Adam led his bride to their new home on the hill overlooking the river. The two-story house, built with the help of townspeople over the winter and spring, stood proud against the backdrop of the Sierra Nevada mountains. A wraparound porch, a spacious kitchen, a parlor with bookshelves built specifically for Zara's growing collection, every detail had been planned with care. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," Adam said as he carried her across the threshold. Zara wrapped her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by happiness. "It's perfect, Adam. Everything is perfect." Later, as they stood on the porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Adam's arms encircled her from behind, pulling her against his chest. "Are they everything you hoped?" He murmured against her ear. "The stars out west." She tilted her head back to look up at the vast expanse of the night sky, remembering that fateful evening when she'd ventured out alone to see them. "Better," she said. "They led me to you." He turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you, Zara." "As I will you," she promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As their lips met, Zara Keller Lawson knew that she had found her true home not in Boston or even in Knights Ferry, but in the arms of the man who had heard her scream in the darkness and ridden to her side. 10 years passed, bringing changes both to Knights Ferry and to the Lawsons. The town grew as the railroad pushed west, bringing new businesses and residents. Adam eventually became sheriff when Morgan retired, and Zara continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named Samuel after her father. 2 more children followed, a daughter, Elizabeth, named for Adam's mother, and another son, Matthew. Their home on the hill became known for its hospitality, with Zara hosting community gatherings, school events, and holiday celebrations. On the 10th anniversary of the night they'd first met, Adam surprised Zara by taking her on a picnic by the river where they'd shared their first private conversation. Their children were spending the day with Mrs. Holloway, now considered a grandmother to them all despite no blood relation. "Do you ever regret it?" Adam asked as they sat beneath the same cottonwood tree, now larger but still offering dappled shade. "Coming west, marrying a lawman, settling in a small town instead of returning to the city," Zara considered his question, watching the play of light on the water. "Not for a moment," she said honestly. "My life in Boston seems like a dream now, something that happened to someone else." He took her hand, running his thumb over the wedding band that adjoined her mother's pearl ring. "You've given me more happiness than I ever thought possible, Zara." "As have you." She leaned against him, comfortable in the intimacy they'd built over a decade of marriage. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day in the schoolroom, that I seemed like the determined type, the kind who knows exactly where she's going?" Adam nodded, smiling at the memory. "I was right about that. You were," she agreed, "though I didn't know at the time that where I was going was toward you." She turned to face him fully. "I came west seeking independence, and I found it, but I also found that independence doesn't mean standing alone. It means choosing your own path, and I chose you, Adam Lawson. I choose you still every day." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes as blue and intense as they had been the night he'd saved her in the alley. "And I choose you, Zara Keller Lawson, today and all the days to come." Their kiss was gentle, familiar yet still thrilling after all these years. When they broke apart, Adam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "Happy anniversary," he said, placing it in her hands. Zara unwrapped it carefully to reveal a delicate gold locket. Opening it, she found a tiny portrait of their family on one side and an inscription on the other. "My heart found its home the night I heard your scream." Tears filled her eyes as she read the words. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Let me," he offered, taking the locket and fastening it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her skin. "Do you know, in all these years, I've never regretted riding down that alley, not once. Nor have I regretted walking out to see the stars that night," she replied. "Even with the danger, it led me to you." They lingered by the river until the sun began to set, reminiscing about the past decade, the challenges they'd faced, the joys they'd shared, the life they'd built together. As they packed up their picnic and prepared to return home, Zara paused to look once more at the river flowing steadily past. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking about how much I love our life," she said simply. "And how grateful I am that a brave deputy once heard a schoolteacher scream." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Let's go home, Zara. Our children are waiting." Together, they walked back toward the town that had become their own, toward the house on the hill where 3 children would be watching eagerly for their return. Toward the future they continued to build day by day. The story of the Eastern schoolteacher and the Western deputy became something of a legend in Knights Ferry. It was told and retold, embellished over time as all good stories are. Some versions made Tyler Kane more menacing, others made Adam's rescue more dramatic. But the heart of the tale remained the same: a woman who came west seeking independence, a man who risked his life to protect her, and the love that grew between them against all odds. As Knights Ferry grew into a prosperous town, the Lawsons remained at its center. Adam served as sheriff for 20 years, keeping the peace with a firm but fair hand, respected by honest citizens and feared by those who weren't. Zara returned to teaching once their youngest started school, eventually becoming the principal of the expanded schoolhouse as the town's population swelled. Their children grew tall and strong, each finding their own path. Samuel inherited his father's sense of justice and his mother's love of learning, eventually attending law school in San Francisco. Elizabeth, spirited and independent like her mother, became one of the first female doctors in the region. Matthew, the youngest, surprised them all by developing a talent for engineering. Helping design the new bridge that spanned the river their town was named for. On the 30th anniversary of their meeting, now grandparents to 5 with more on the way, Adam and Zara stood once more on their porch, watching the sun set over the town they'd helped build. "Was it everything you hoped for?" Adam asked, his hair now silver but his eyes still that striking blue. "This life we made together," Zara, her own hair streaked with gray but her spirit as vibrant as ever, smiled up at her husband. "It was more," she said simply, "so much more than I ever dared to dream." He bent to kiss her, a gesture as natural as breathing after 3 decades of marriage. "As it was for me," he murmured against her lips. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the same stars that had once drawn a young schoolteacher out into the dangerous night, Zara Keller Lawson said a silent prayer of thanks for the scream that had brought her hero riding to her side, and for all the days and nights of love that had followed.